Right. Welcome to round 8 of UADC. My name is Ruben. I'm your chair for this round. To my left is Hassan. And my right is Eric. Okay. On the motion, this House believes that the Kurdish people should cease attempts to establish an independent Kurdistan in order to seek greater political power and control. I invite the Prime Minister in.
Mr. Speaker, decades upon decades of advocating for an independent political state has done nothing for the Kurds. It has only managed to turn people against Kurds and make them see them as suspicious, make them fear from them, Mr. Speaker. However, we think it's the Kurds, when they have adopted and when they have being increasingly cooperative with the state of Iraq in its military battles, etc. That kind of thing has seen increased cooperation and returning of favors from Iraq in the form of increasing economic access, for instance, of its oil. We think in this debate, the Kurds within Iraq should adopt the latter strategy. They should focus instead on wanting for an independent Kurdistan, instead on increasing political capital and increasing political engagement with that country. What does that actually look like? We think that looks like forming political parties, standing for elections, standing for making coalitions with other members and other political parties within Iraq. It means focusing on specific issues that Kurds face within Iraq, such as discrimination, such as denial from public offices, etc. We think those are the things that Kurds should focus on. I want to do a few things in this speech. First of all, I want to describe what the status quo looks like. Secondly, I want to tell you why an independent Kurdistan, which is the goal that that site stands for, just cannot succeed. It will be a failed state, it will be a terrible state which will constantly be in danger of being eliminated out. And we think finally, why under status quo, Kurds can achieve the things that they want to. The first question, so status quo. Under status quo, what do Kurds actually want? They want some degree of autonomy over their affairs. They want an end to discrimination that they face within Iraq. They basically want increased representation, etc. Notice, Mr. Speaker, that the aim of just wanting an independent state is merely instrumental in getting all of these things. If on our side, Kurds can also manage to get all of these things, we think they will be quite happy with that thing. Okay. Before I move on, just one clarification of what the independent Kurdistan looks like on that side, right? Under status quo, what they have been campaigning for is having like a state that covers where Kurds are living, but also something that Kurds carves into the area that's lived by Kurds in Syria and Turkey, etc. All of these states will be included in the independent Kurdistan that side stands for, and they are like happy to encourage me to say that. So, an independent Kurdistan just not succeed, Mr. Speaker. Because as I already told you, they are cutting cars into land that other nations feel belong to them. These are three nations, Syria, Turkey, and Iraq. I'm going to tell you how it faces significant threat for all of these nations in the instance where it does that. First of all, Turkey. We think recognized under status quo, the Turks have been increasingly suspicious of increasing political dominance or military strength of Kurds. They've cracked down upon Kurds, they've killed Kurdish civilians and said that was collateral in the hope of trying to eliminate any sign of political resistance in Turkey. There's a lot of bad blood between people residing in Turkey and the Kurds, Mr. Speaker, and we think that's increasingly difficult, problematic now when Erdogan has gained almost absolute power in that state, where it has cracked down on protesters, when it has cracked down any sign of discontent towards the government, Mr. Speaker. We think what's the most likely scenario that when an independent Kurdistan is established, is that Turkey will not tolerate an independent state of Kurdistan that it's highly suspicious of, that it hates, that the people in Turkey hate along its borders. It's highly likely that there will be constant military danger from the state of Turkey. There will be aggression from the army of Turkey, which is far greater than the army of the small state of Kurdistan, Mr. Speaker. There will be losses of lives, people will be killed, and there will have an impact on the economy of the new state of Kurdistan. Secondly, with regards to the relations with Iraq, we think because the independent Kurdistan takes control over the oil fields that are very important to Iraq in the northern part of Kurdistan, we think that Iraq will also be obviously that and the fact that it's taking up a lot of territory, which people in Iraq also feel quite attached to. We think similarly, Iraq will also be aggressive towards the state, and the military consequences are the same. But more importantly, we think that the independent state of Kurdistan will have no economic access. Let's explore that a bit further. Because under status quo, Kurdistan has economic oil fields, right? But the problem is it has no port, it has no access and no ability to actually sell those oil fields. That's why it constantly collaborates and cooperates with the Iraqi government to go out and be able to sell those oil fields. In the instance that Iraq government is absolutely pissed at them, they can, even if they don't want to engage militarily with them, they can engage economically. They can cut off their access to the ports. So the independent state of Kurdistan will absolutely have no economic access. That's terrible. Before I move on to the consequences on Syria, yes.
Even though you already said that the government is increasingly being aggressive to these Kurds, how are you so sure that your political parties will work and your political reforms are going to happen?
No, so I did actually say that, like, in the state of Iraq, it's not true that they are being increasingly aggressive. Actually, the trends are in the opposite direction. What I am telling you is after this action that takes up a chunk of territory from Iraq, people are actually going to be pissed. All of those progresses are going to be reversed. Finally, on Syria, Mr. Speaker, we told you the same thing would happen. Syrian army is much more powerful militarily. So, Mr. Speaker, you're placing this small nation surrounded by three big nations who have a far greater military control, and this small nation has no ability to resist. We also don't think that the US will be an ally to Kurds, because we think under status quo, Kurdistan is supported by Iran, whose influence US currently wants to neutralize. So it's unlikely to be an ally. Therefore, Kurdistan will have no ability to protect itself. Why do we think it's like engagement with Iraq is better? The first thing to recognize here is that Kurdistan and the Kurds are actually at a turning point right now. There have been increasing progresses and increasing like positive things that have happened. First of all, Kurdish battle gains against ISIS have actually changed the perception of Kurds within Iraq. People for the first time seeing Kurdish field commanders along with Iraqi field commanders, because Iraqis like sovereignty is so important to them. Recognizing the contribution of Kurds in protecting that, they have become increasingly amenable to that, Mr. Speaker. Furthermore, the election of Haider al-Abadi has also been quite significant because he is more progressive. He has, for example, recently signed off like a far more generous deal with regards to oil resources, which is like up to 23% of sharing of revenues, Mr. Speaker. We think that if they shun the former strategy and adopt the latter strategy of increasing cooperation, etc., they are going to get better terms, they are going to get better economic access, they are going to get better control, and the discrimination that is faced by Kurds within Iraq right now, we will finally be able to end those things. For all of those reasons, Mr. Speaker, for the future of Kurds in the Middle East, I'm very proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for his speech. Look at the case for the opposition member to invite the leader of the opposition.
The clash coming from opposition is going to be fairly simple. Number one, we think that the Kurdish interest to establish an independent state it's in the Kurdish interest to establish an independent political state, because ultimately the political interest of Iraq right now is malign, especially in the context of a post-conflict state at any rate. But secondly, we think that it is comparatively easier and more likely for them to succeed in establishing an independent state compared to influencing the internal politics of Iraq, given the lots of issues that Iraq is currently facing right now, and given that they are not being prioritized as citizens of that particular government. We think that it is our burden to prove as the opposition, to prove to you why it is more likely that we're going to be able to succeed in establishing our own state compared to trying to convince people who are not necessarily interested in improving the quality of life for these people, ultimately, in order for us to be able to make sure that we improve the lives of these Kurdish people at the end of the day. There are two things that I want to talk about in my speech. Number one, why independence is still better and still worth fighting for, despite all the odds that the previous speaker has talked about. But secondly, why is it more likely to happen on our side that we are able to establish independence, and why is it less likely that we will be able to influence the Iraqi government? But before that, a couple of rebuttals to the previous speakers. Because his first claim was that the pursuit for independence will never succeed because ultimately the positioning of the Kurds right now are unstrategic because it encompasses 3 countries at the end of the day which have their own political interests in the end. I think that it's not that just because they have their own interests doesn't mean that there's no longer a room for negotiation, most especially when the Kurdish fight for independence is not necessarily a fight that they're fighting alone. If you're going to take a look at it in the international community, there are also a lot of other actors that try to support these kinds of acts coming for the Kurdish. Like, for example, the EU is in contemplation of how it's going to support the Kurdish state, or for example, even the US, and how it's going to pass the vote for establishing an independent state in the referendum that is going to happen, right? I think that ultimately, because of this kind or existence of another actor that will ultimately allow them to have a momentum, in order for them to negotiate with these kinds of other states, there's going to be an incentive for these other states, for example, to be able to make sure that there's going to be negotiations. Even with the existence of oil, which they said that Turkey would most likely want to protect, for example, for Iraq, is something that we don't necessarily believe in. Why? Because right now, we're currently facing an oil crisis, where, for example, the prices of oil are necessarily dropping down, and the interest of nations to hold on to their resource of oil is not ultimately that strong. So ultimately, that hold on, the hold that they're trying to defend on their side, while it's going to be hard for other countries to let go of that piece of land, does not exist, because that kind of incentive is not as strong, and there are other negotiations that might happen. For example, if there is enough political momentum and support from the international community, we could promise them more trades, for example, that will ensure economic benefits, which is more lucrative for them, and something that is more tangible compared to the promise of oil, which is unstable right now. So ultimately, we think that those kinds of concerns coming from their side could be addressed with our model, right? But secondly, it tells us that the economic access of Kurds will not necessarily be lucrative, because again, they won't be able to access the resources that will be available to them. We don't think this is particularly true, because as we've already told you, there's going to be enough the likelihood of negotiations on our side is higher compared to their side, where we will be able to empower them, compared to when you try to penetrate the system, where there are a lot of other conflicting interests in which you are viewed as a minority and viewed as not as important as those other people, right? Before I move to my discussion, sure.
So, Kurdish militias are currently armed by Iran, someone whom USA has already denounced. Similarly, Syria is backed by Russia. So, in this case, why on earth would these two countries be able to back the Kurds?
We already told you that those are not the countries, like, for example, the EU, the EU, something that's necessarily in support of the independence of the Kurdish state, because ultimately they don't want them to undergo the same kinds of human rights that they already experiencing. We already told you that there is still interest for them to negotiate, because there will be economic interest that will be in play, which we will be talking about later on in our speech. So let's talk about why independence is still better. So let's answer the question: what is the status of Kurds in Iraq, right? The reason why they have their own region in Iraq, somewhere in the northern part, is because there is an animosity between them and the Iraqis. Let's characterize that problem further. There is no political participation for these people, because ultimately they don't have a say in what kinds of laws and policies will be implemented by the country, and there's no state influence that necessarily tries to allocate, for example, or them being prioritized in the budgeting of the state. We think that most importantly, their cultures are at odds with each other, because they are viewed as a minority religion and not as important as the other peoples who are members of the majority religion in that particular government at the end of the day. Given this, we have to answer the question: how is a minority culture going to battle its way through a state that is also recovering from the aftermath of war? Because if we're going to take a look at Iraq, it's also a post-conflict society that is recovering from a real democracy and undergoing a transitional government right now. I think that in the Middle East, if you're going to take a look at it, it is already inherently hard for the major cultures and religions to reconcile their differences because of the things that they want are inherently against odds at each other, right? So we think that the argument is that it's less likely for you to establish yourself in an extremely volatile government because the citizens have their own interests that they want their government to prioritize. And ultimately, if the government responds to the needs of the Kurds, the citizens won't be happy because they think that it's not that they're not being given 100% full of the attention that they deserve at the end of the day. We think that the question of political incentive does not exist because politicians have less interest in stabilizing them and addressing their needs at the end of the day. Because since they already have their own region there, which is peaceful and which is being governed by their own elected leader, there is not much to lose for the Iraqi government if they don't negotiate or deal with the Kurds right now. So there is more incentive to put that off, or for example, to just put that on hold, because ultimately there is not much in for the Iraqi government. We think that it's just like, for example, the situation of the Muslims in Mindanao in the Philippines, because ultimately they're just a minority part of the culture, and there are much more other important issues that the government wants to cater to. So we think that in order for us to be able to forward the kinds of things that the Kurds want, it's more important that we are able to establish our own governments, because here the independence that we will be able to establish will be able to prioritize and establish the kinds of policies that will target our needs. At least now we won't have to be treated as second-class citizens, because ultimately we have the jurisdiction and we have the control and the direction of our progress and our development as a culture in our hands. We think that with all four of those reasons and more, we oppose. Thank you.
Thanks, Speaker, for speech. To extend the case, the government bench invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you.
We want to first of all establish that nationalism doesn't demand statehood. That this type gives, I think, scant justification for why the cause of the Kurds demands independence. These guys seem to run lines of argumentation that suggest that Kurdish independence is instrumentally important, but very little for why it is important for other reasons. So presumably, we think they agree that the main reason for independence is instrumental. We think on this, we think the concept of nation, the idea of a Kurdish people, doesn't have to be defined by the Kurdish state itself, but often being defined narrowly by the politics of your homeland to make life worse for people, for members of that people who aren't part of the homeland. More of that later. But we think this debate is to be judged on the instrumental goals that these guys talk about. Being able to have protections for your people, for being able to have economic control over your oil, and so on and so forth. We're happy to engage them on these terms. Two things in my speech. First, I want to talk about whether it's actually easy to get easier for Kurdistan to succeed and for them to succeed in Iraq. And secondly, I want to talk about ethno-nationalism and why it is damaging in general, but maybe in particular damaging in this part of the world. Firstly, is Kurdistan doomed, or is it easier to get Kurdistan? The main part of the analysis they give us is, I think, fairly unresponsive to the stuff Sharif tells you. Because what they say is it's predicated on a number of things. Firstly, it's predicated on idea of international support. I don't know where this international support actually comes from. Sharif already gives you analysis of how the USA is unlikely to support independent Kurdistan because he fears that independent Kurdistan will become an Iranian-client state. The USA wants to limit Iran's influence in the region. But then they are like, oh, the European Union will support it. I think that's bizarre when the EU wants to maintain good relations with Turkey, as much as Erdogan is an unpleasant guy. Turkey is still a big trading partner with the EU. There were in the past, not so much recently, moves to include Turkey as part of the European Union. And I think when push comes to shove, the European Union, as well as the United States, probably put the interests of an important NATO ally and military ally in Turkey above the interests of Kurdistan. So the point here is, if, in order to project military influence into the Middle East, the the US and EU need military bases flying out of Turkey or Turkish airspace, then they're probably likely to accede Turkey when they say, don't recognize this new rogue state of Kurdistan, which also, by the way, we name as a terrorist actor. So no international support on your side. But then they're like, no. You won't get a bad deal with Iraq on oil. Know that Sharik already gives you analysis for why you wouldn't, because trends are moving in that direction. I'll get to a little bit more on that in a bit. But also that your independent Kurdistan is literally starved, right, without sea access. They again don't respond to this, and they're just like, if we have all the oil revenues, that is better. That is false. Sharik's analysis about how Turkey and Syria pose an existential threat to the people, to the newly established Republic of Kurdistan. That both Turkey, that because of reasons of the war, Assad has reasons to hate the Kurds and the Kurdish forces. And for existential and ideological reasons, Turkey has shown great deal of reasoning to hate independent Kurdistan. More relevantly, both of these states will fear that Kurdish militia forces, which they name terrorists, can fade across the border into independent Kurdistan much more readily than in a status quo, when at least that is nominally the Republic of Iraq can lobby directly to the Iraqi government to prevent these things from happening. So we think Turkey and Syria are likely to agitate against international support for the Republic of Kurdistan or launch military incursions whenever they can. That is a Kurdistan that is beset with instability. But worse yet, we think that even if you establish a Republic of Kurdistan and it manages to stand on its own 2 feet, it's some nominal support from some people, it is bad for the people who remain in those republics. Because note that if Syria and Turkey, especially Turkey, have an existential fear of the Kurds gaining their own independent states, a base for which they can launch terrorist attacks, then they are far more likely to crack down on the Kurdish minorities within their own governing lands. That is also likely true of Iraq. I think Iraq is actually has far worse possible outcomes that happen. I'll get to that in a bit. But even in Turkey and Syria, recognize that not everyone will be able to move, right? Your Kurdistan will not automatically be able to carve out a sort of territory in the heart of the Anatolian homeland, which means that Kurds who are left behind in Turkey will suffer more. They will have less political power because now they are expected to move to the new homeland, which means that they won't be able to get minority protections that they can continue to fight for. That is also true for Iraqi Kurds. But let's look at Iraq and why Iraq is why ethno-nationalism in there is dangerous, and why the counterfactuals that it can offer good things to the Kurds. Know that Sharik tells you that the Kurds are now more accepted than ever before. But the deeper analysis here is to see that this is a unique point in new Iraqi history. That Iraq is at a crossroads. It is now trying to rise from the ashes of Saddam Hussein's revolution against Saddam, and it's now trying to figure out what state it's going to become. Right now, the Iraqi constitution, so nominally at least there is some force, guarantees protections for Kurds and guarantees that Iraq is a multicultural, multi-ethnic state. It is the last bastion of the hope for a secular nationalism in the Middle East, because everywhere around it we have ethno-states defined by inherent things like race and religion. The one uniting case, the one uniting myth behind many nations is the idea that forged in battle there is a unity that can be formed. Iraq is now facing an existential crisis. ISIS has threatened to take away swords of territory that are crucial to the Iraqi experience. The fact that Kurdish forces, Sunni forces, and Shia forces, for the first time ever, participated in a coordinated military operation to retake Mosul and push ISIS out of the Iraqi homeland is crucial, because for the first time, Kurdish militia commanders, people who initially were seen as backwater Kurds, backwater hicks of Iraq, were seen and put on the same pedestal as Iraqi military commanders, decorated generals and colonels from the Iraqi National Army. That's powerful, because for the first time, Iraqis can be like, Kurds did something for us. This is the time in which you can play on that. But more innately, because the constitution guarantees minimum quotas for Kurdish parliamentary participation in the Iraqi government, note that these guys play an important moderating force in Iraqi politics. Firstly, the presence of Kurdish parties with their own interests means that Sunni and Shia parties, which might otherwise only fight for their own interests, have to appeal to the middle, have to appeal to a common, good stuff that gets good for all Iraqis, to get that powerful 15% swath of support. So that moderates both Sunni and Shia parties' politics. In the counterfactual, when Kurdistan leaves, not only are these parties likely to not care about Kurdish interests at all, to the extent to which there are Kurds that remain behind, but also that are likely to care about any other interests other than the ethnic groups they represent, which means that you just get Sunni versus Shia politics in Iraq, where that division is deep, to say the least. And the worst thing we can see happening in Iraq is Sunni and Shia parties both jostling for control, each of them trying to gain their own fiefdoms. And in fact, the worst case scenario is that Iraq just breaks down into a Sunni state and a Shia state. The last thing you want in the Middle East is a civil war again in Iraq. For the tensions that ISIS threatened to hold, to tear apart, to open up again, that is what can happen if Kurdistan leaves. For those reasons, we think the Kurds must remain.
Thanks, Vigo. Next in the case for the opposition bench, I invite the deputy governor.
To empower a majority of individuals does not just come from the cost of empowering leaders and people on the higher strata. It also includes empowering people on the ground and their ability to be heard in the government that they're trying to be in, right? We tell you that the value that came mainly from government side is that the development of Kurdistan through compromises and dealing with Iraq is the best form of development that they're willing to take, right? Firstly, they had no operationalization on how this assures development of Kurdistan when it's ready to begin with, right? If you really heard the majority of their cases, it's focused on instructing why an independent state is not particularly available, but they merely never went through the process of why automatically, just because you compromise with the government, or what kind of compromises are you willing to be with, or having the kind of laws and policies they're trying to listen, because they fail to extend the knowledge that these are the people that have transparent access to people on the ground, right? Like, for instance, rights of individuals to rally or lobby against the type of government that they have, right? Because all of their assumptions are hinged on the benevolence of the prime minister or the political leaders of Iraq, right? The benefits of gaining political power and economic development would always be in the decision calculus of the leaders of Iraq to begin with. And it's highly unlikely that they would prioritize Kurdistan, especially in the development of their sovereignty or even their degree of sovereignty, because they were voted by top majority Shiite individuals. It means that they are always going to get called out when they prioritize other individuals. Because if you take a look at it, most of the platforms created by Al-Jafari are always in recognition of poverty alleviation and fixing international conflicts with other individuals. Once the people see that they're not following through with this kind of logic, then they would always reflect that type of hatred towards the Kurds. Just like what's happening, for instance, when you take a look at situations of refugees in different states, or even in the Philippines, wherein minorities like ARMM are considered in the news. A lot of individuals have negative attitudes to them, because they would always consider, and their seeker would always lean on towards their own problems, right? But secondly, we question the fact of what happens when you do stay in their model, right? Firstly, we tell you it really became clear from Bianca that these individuals are treated as second-class citizens, right? This means that they're not particularly prioritized. Because if you take a look at the reasonable characterization, the volatile nature of religion is extremely competitive in Iraq, right? The othering occurs are apparent. Mainly Kurds, when they are prioritized, or for instance, they are propagating their religion or gaining propaganda religion or assuming that people are influencing their religion. To that extent, they would assume when they get more influence in the country, it becomes a greater backlash now, because now they're hating these individuals, right? We think that particularly we get better development under our model, right? What was the proposition given by opposition, right? For instance, they already conceded that these individuals have a particular large oil field that are being utilized right now, right? We tell you particularly one of the greatest hindrances as to why Kurdistans don't really get that much of money is because the one that controls that type of oil fields, or the people are Iraqi law policy makers or economic trend setters, right? We say that hinders their ability to reproduce it. And since that oil field is already particularly being used, then the people who do go through that, or the countries that do utilize it, would gain greater loss if they drop it right now. Because when you go into oil fields, it needs investments of billions of dollars for sustainability and things like that, right? But secondly, our model of how the European Union would always be there to also help you and guide you in such a long time, then it means structures do exist. Like for instance, who are we gonna vote and what type of government, like executive, legislative, and those kinds of things, right? For instance, if you take a look at the case of Kosovo, right, the reason why it's also being recognized as partly independent, slightly, and towards its development of being recognized as an individual, they try to respond to this by saying that we won't prioritize these individuals because, of course, our incentives are towards Turkish individuals that may give us money. It was already conceded to them. Like for instance, that Turkey already has a volatile attitude, especially if you take a look at the political climate right now, where even Netherlands hate them. That it also means it's a large sacrifice for EU if they sided with Turkey, right? This gives them more incentive to also help Kurdistan's develop in these kinds of things, right? But secondly, they have also a structured military that would also incentivize individuals. Like for instance, the ISIS execution, which is also used to them, right? Those incentives of the coalition of the willing is one of the greatest things that individuals can get because it's fairly successful if you compare it, for instance, to Syria, wherein they do destroy or remove the ISIS, right? And we tell you it's comparatively better even when both houses will use them militarily because under this process, you actually go to bureaucratic processes. Wherein you get the consent of the people on the ground. They do really agree towards the perspectives of Iraq to begin with, right? What's going to be my case, right? I'm going to talk about the power imbalance between Iraq and Kurdistan. But second, the representation in the international community. First case on the power imbalance. This answers the question in which side do we really politically empower these individuals and economically empower them, right? This works under the premise. If you take a look at it, majority of the law policies right now are trendings of recreations of bills in Iraq are always focused on the on Shiites, or for instance, right? We argue that further harms the development of jurisdiction right now, right? Before that, yeah.
Right. So if we acknowledge this argument that there's a power imbalance between Iraq and Kurdistan, doesn't that imbalance one still exist when Kurdistan is independent? And who gets worse because Iraq now has incentives and wants to talk to Kurdistan?
But the problem with the power imbalance that you have right now is something that cannot be spotted by the international community or have the checks and balances to call them out if they do have a power imbalance, right? Comparatively, if you give them the opportunity to have their own land or to be recognized as an own state, then they get to be represented more than my case later. Basically, the case of power imbalance is that since most of the majority and most of the incentive of Iraq will always be working towards their own incentives to get better names or, for instance, to get a better reputation in the international community, then they have no incentive to fully develop Kurdistan or to even give them more economic shares than they deserve, because most of the workers here are also Kurds in this instance, right? We tell you that there's a power imbalance between these individuals because if you're making economic deals or economic platforms or projects or even political structures, it would always be leaning towards the decision calculus of Iraq, right? Because majority of the people in the seats are people from Iraq or Shiites in themselves, right? So we tell that power imbalance also affects the laws that are being created, and it also affects the priority of the projects that are being done in Kurds, right? With all those reasons being said, we're proud of it.
Okay, I really need to. Yeah, please. Okay. Sorry.
You should leave yourself.
Yes, I will do that. Sorry, pass me water.
Oh. Yeah, thank you, speaker, for speech. And some to close the substantive case for the government might come here.
One moment, need to arrange things. Okay. Iraq was the birthplace, one of the birthplaces of civilization. Hammurabi of old of Babylon wrote the first laws of mankind, and we think that most Iraqis would like to return to that form. That generally speaking, they will treat the Kurdish well if they stay as they are as minority inside Iraq. But generally, that prompting independent Kurdistan is basically making our dream of a new Babylon quite impossible. Let's start with that first. Kurdistan is essentially impossible. Why? One, that the first thing that proposition said. The Kurds are going to get international help from, well, let's start with the USA. The USA hates Iraq. Currently, Kurdish militias, as POI, as Jan has told you, are backed by Iran. Iran likes the Kurds. If an independent Kurdistan is formed, most likely it will be backed by Iran as well. What's going to happen? The USA is not going to help you form that independent Kurdistan, and even if it does, and your Kurdistan somehow forms, Kurdistan is going to get destroyed by the USA, essentially, because it hates Iran. But the next player that we have is essentially Syria. Now, Assad obviously is not going to give you land, because one, he's a dictator, two, there's oil and territory at stake here, but more importantly, he's also backed by Russia, which means, again, another person in the UN Security Council is off the list of players who are willing to help. Finally, we have the EU. Intervention, we have to realize that the world today is quite different. That firstly, that the EU has very little appetite for waging both diplomatic and actual warfare because of the Eurozone crisis, because of the fact that they've been drained of both diplomatic and military resources for the last 2 decades, and that instead they pulled out of Iraq and the entire of the Middle East, except ISIS had to bring them back. So in the end, we don't see any coalition of the willing that's going to be able to help form your Kurdistan in the very first place. And even if they did form a Kurdistan, most likely, the fact that you're straddling the geopolitical proxies of 3 different superpowers, essentially, they're not going to help you, okay? So that's the point. They're not going to help you even if you're formed. They're not going to stop other people from destroying you if you are that. And that's the thing. Why would Erdogan, both of whom are one dictator, one kind of almost dictator after he took over the military. Essentially speaking, you are an existential threat to them. Kurds have had the longest history of being terrorist nationalists, essentially. That they only recently, in the last decade or so, exited this status analogous to the IRA, only because Turkey quite literally assassinated their national/military leader, al-Assad. Look, so in that sense, the Kurds, an independent Kurdistan, is not just going to be seen as a belligerent force, but also would likely, in its current armed state, essentially become a nation of armed old men and young and kids and boys. That at the end of the day, other than the simple fact that they would end up fighting for war, that other people will see them as these things. And that's why we think that there's no nation that's going to grant them any sort of autonomy or sovereignty other than Iraq. Which brings us to the key player here, Iraq. Iraq, we told you, was belligerent to Kurdistan back in the day of Saddam. But why is it that this isn't the case today? They ignore 2 key things that my speakers have brought to you. That firstly, Iraq is actually dependent on the Kurdish to maintain as a swing vote and as a mediating force between the Shiites and the Sunnis within Iraq, which essentially means they have an essential part to play, giving them not just bargaining power, but also a place in the new Babylon. But on a second level, they also decided to ignore the current thing that is happening in Syria. Because right now, there is a myth of a united Iraq. Okay, it's still a myth, because let's just admit that, sure, Sunnis and Shiites and Kurdish may still have differences. But the thing is, the current war against ISIS is forging the fires of war, is forging this myth into an actual truth. That right now, Kurdish people have been recognized as having an equal status. But why is that going to be maintained after the war against ISIS, right? Let's give them, they didn't even make that argument, let's be charitable. Okay, why is it that we think that in the long term that this is going to last? Because in the first place, the Iraqis essentially are very happy with their democracy. That the post-Saddam Iraqis are tired of war and oppression. And therefore they are the, yes, shining that beacon of the Middle East as the new Babylon, as I keep on telling you. And that's why we tell you again that in all likelihood they will continue to support their constitution and follow the rules and institutions like most democracies do, and therefore accord the rights that Kurds are given. But wait, for Kurds being given their status quo rights, because we told you these are already in existence and already being upheld quite good. Because Kurds currently live in autonomous tribal regions, they make their own local laws, and they are allowed a very large share of the oil, which they essentially don't need to do anything to get. They literally just sit on the land and the Iraqi government pumps it out and gives them money. Look, in this case then, considering the current bargaining power they have as a militia against ISIS, in serving as a buffer against possible incursions from Turkey and Syria, that in the end, we see that most likely, in the long run, before 6, they'll be given what they want. Okay, so that's why. Because 1, they form a strategic buffer. 2, they form mediating interest. 3, they are basically, in the sense of propaganda, creating the truth of a united Iraq. But they tell us that oil is going to get in the way, that Iraq, the Shia majority, is going to oppress them because they're sitting on oil. That Kirkuk, their Jerusalem, basically has a gold mine underneath. But what? I think this is a bit bizarre because their ally kind of contradicted their yellow there, because their ally said the oil prices are dropping. They don't care about oil anymore. So their group kind of has to decide for them whether or not like Kirkuk is going to be supported. But more importantly than that, we think that generally speaking, the Shiites are also tired of being a dictatorial majority. Because you see, if the Kurdish and the Sunnis unite against the Shiites, what Iraq is flamed for war once again, and the dissolution and chaos that we do not want on either side, and neither do the people of Iraq. So, assuming that the Shiites decide to become belligerent and dictatorial against other minorities in their country, then they'll lose the entire new Babylon that we want to create.
Where do we actually the interest of the Kurdish people? And secondly, where's this realizing what happened? Comparative of likely scenarios and worst case best case scenarios, right? Let's go to the first question. What's in the best interest of the Kurdish people? There's already a discussion from both benches that essentially, given that the Kurdish people are a large population of a minority religion that has existed almost at the same time as Muslim or Islam, it means that these individuals have been there and have a certain type of entitlement to their own self-determination by virtue of their existence in numbers and the time that they've been there, right? We think that it's kind of iffy coming from government about the kind of reception that Iraq has of Kurds. On the one hand, they tell us that Kurds are now fine with Iraqis, but at the same time, if the Kurds try to go and become independent, Iraqis are going to get mad. Without a logical analysis as to how exactly that triggers that kind of reaction, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, we think it's problematic the fact that they never really told us how campaigns will be effective, aside from the fact that Talabani is the new is one of the leaders of the country, right? Never mind, it's a transitional government that doesn't have that much teeth, particularly because it lacks the funding and it lacks the stable infrastructures to make sure that those policies happen anyway. We think that at best, assuming that they do have campaigns, we think that that's not worth. We think that the benefits of that particular campaign after this first discussion will be very minimal, particularly because one, your Kurds is the particular minority, and secondly, they never responded to this analysis of how the prioritization of resources will always go to the majority. Ayla told you in her speech that even if you're a Kurd, you're still beholden to the majority of individuals that you have to serve, meaning that you have to prioritize Shiite interests with the limited kind of funds that your transitional government has. No response coming from their side. I think it's significantly important because it goes to show you the internal politics that happens even within these regions. That even if you're currently fine with the Kurds existing in your region, there's no assurance of political representation and political prioritization, meaning even in their best case, their campaigns don't really work that well, right? But secondly, they talked about all these kinds of forms of proving to us the converse of how exactly their mechanism will work best and protect these Kurdish individuals after this discussion. Firstly, they tell us this really big harm of there will be violence in all fronts, right? Particularly because Turkey hates the Kurds, and then Syria hates the Kurds as well. But you have to analyze, right? Why was our analysis of backing and international allies significantly important? Because even they conceded, right, that the Kurds, to some extent, have political leverage in the international community. Because if you can see, they're the last bastion of the West against terrorism. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you analyze it, they're funded by the coalition of the willing, and all of the resources given to them in the Iran army are from the West, right? Because Iran doesn't really have that much money, even if they have all those men who are willing to fight for them, right? So we think, therefore, that the interest is intrinsically there. And logically speaking, if you're the EU and that's your only bastion against terrorism spreading in that particular area, it's likely for you to succeed to the kinds of to create negotiations with that particular actor, which are the Kurds, to give them what they want in order to ensure that they're going to be protected later, that they're not going to go into your homeland, Mr. Speaker. Now let's tackle the idea of Turkey, right? Because then there comes this issue. If the EU does care about the Kurds, they also care about Turkey, right? But you have to understand, firstly, that the interest of the EU in Turkey is also present. And we think even in that negotiation, Turkey won't automatically go ballistic in the EU just because they support the Kurds, right? Because it's already status quo. The coalition of the willing that includes Paris, Germany, Belgium, give money to the Kurds in order to make sure that they have the proper arms and the proper training to combat terrorism. We think that even comparing, we think that the interests of EU will still lie, for example, in their better protection. We think, Mr. Speaker, that given that Erdogan is inherently already belligerent, he doesn't directly attack the EU, one, because he knows he can't win. Secondly, he knows if he damages the allies, it's easy to sanction them as a state, which he doesn't want because he wants all the money of that particular state, right? We think, secondly, it's unlikely that your Iraq then will support the Kurds, assuming that all the other people hate Kurds, right? Because as a fledgling nation such as Iraq, why would I help a terrorist race and risk hurting my neighbors, Mr. Speaker? For instance, it's unlikely for Iraq to make sure that Kurds are represented if there's a great animosity for Kurds because they don't want conflict with Turkey or Syria, right? So we think even on their best case scenario, because Iraq has particular interest of the majority to make sure that they take care of, it's unlikely for you to ensure that Kurds participate in the political process. We think that the comparative, therefore, is in their worst case scenario, the Kurds will not be represented because Iraq has its own interest in play. Comparatively on our side, even if, for example, Turkey gets violent, for example, Syria gets violent, there's always the front of the international community backing you because you're their only bastion against terrorism, right? Before I'm watching.
So in the status quo, the West funds Kurdish non-independent militia in the fight against terrorism. They are quite happy with the status quo. Why would they propose or support a change in the status quo?
They're currently happy with status quo because they're benefiting. There's leverage for your Kurds to ask for more because they're doing their part in that particular kind of negotiation. We think that's valid, and we think that's an analysis that you really failed to respond in your constructive, right? Secondly, you have to understand, then comparatively, we think that if you go for an independent Kurdish state, right, we think it's a lot easier, particularly because of the analysis coming from GAFAT that they never responded to, right? We told you that the Kurdish already has a regional government in northern Iraq, which is something that they conceded to. At the very least, they're protected by the constitution, and Iraq acknowledges the need for independence for these Kurds. They just have to go to the extent of pushing for that significant independence. We think that the animosity is unlikely to happen on our side because one, you don't really have, there's lesser burden for Iraq to take care of you because you're going to be independent. Secondly, we think that the animosity is likely on your side because you're pushing for the prioritization of a race that's a minority and shouldn't even be prioritized in that particular kind of politics to begin with. We think comparatively, it's a lot better, for example, in the interest of Iraq even, to lose that kind of land instead of political participation and funneling their own funds into a minority that doesn't have any assured benefit, and that might anger their allies, right? So let's compare, right? What do we think is more likely? We think there will always be the possibility of instability and political interest in play. At least on our side, we make sure that Iraq has an easier time because they don't have to care about the minority and they don't get attacked by their neighbors because they're supporting terrorist groups. Unlike on their side, where even if there is political campaigning, there's no assurance of the goal of self-determination of the state. With that, we're very, very proud.
Thanks, Speaker, for speech. And it's the substantive portion of it. We get the reply section and write the opposition. Here.
Given the significance that the Kurdish people have been able to establish for themselves in the fight against ISIS, we think that at this point in time, it is in their highest momentum that they could establish an independence for themselves because we know they're going to be at their side. There are two questions that I in this. Number one, likely, because we've already told you the characteristics of Iraq on one hand, the internal politics will be a minority group, their interests are not in line with each other. We already told you that the political incentive for the government of Iraq doesn't necessarily exist. What did they say? They said that because it's in the process of a transitional government, that it's in the process of the creation of its constitution, there will be a lot of incentive to create a more friendly and more diverse government because ultimately the people are just so tired of wars and ultimately they just want to be good people. This is not responsive to the characteristic that we've told you, that there is an inherent animosity between the relationships of these people that we are talking about. Why? Because their religions or cultures are inherently personal to them, and they think that the existence of the others just ultimately clashes with those kinds of cultures at the end of the day. Which is why we think no matter what kind of compromise you think you try to reach, it's still going to be inherently impossible for you to reach those kinds of concessions because ultimately the interests of the majority are always going to be listened to by those people who have the political incentive to be re-elected, for example, or not be backlash upon by the people who voted for them. Because we've already told you that political incentive will only exist if we know that there are a lot of people who would fight for that kind of clamor and for that kind of momentum. And currently, we don't have that right now because, again, the Kurds are a minority in part of Iraq. We think that in order for us to be able to make sure that we're going to be able to position ourselves in such a way that we're really going to be able to radicalize or revolutionize the way that the Iraqi government sees us, or the people at the very least, in which case there will be institutionalized protection, or for example, there will be an improvement of how we're going to be viewed as citizens. There must be a revolution, for example, that all people are supportive of the existence of this Kurds on the first place. We've already told you that the existence, for example, of a separate region of the Kurds in northern Iraq is already an acknowledgement that they are different people. However, we just need to push this to the extent that they will be able to direct their progression and their development as a people. Because we think that even with the existence of that meeting, it's not fully functional because still, for example, the allocation of jobs or the allocations of resources will government still a marginally small portion of allocated to us because we don't matter compared to the rest of Iraq, and our interests are not as important compared to what we have already told you. That if we're going to continuously fight for independence, there is more likelihood that we will be backed by people who have more power and who have the and have bargaining chips towards actors that are interplaying in this debate. We've already told you that international communities like EU, for example, has its interest. For example, offer more trading deals with the other countries that are in conflict, because ultimately we know that the Kurdish people are our only hope and our only chance in order to be sure that ISIS will not be able to penetrate our lands at the end of the day. Those kinds of characterizations are very important because it just shows you the motivation and the motivations of the actors that we need to be able to address. I think that this is in the best interest of the Kurds, because again, we think that if they're not able to establish their own independent state, they will always be viewed as second-class citizens unless they outnumber the number of Shiites in Iraq, for example, because ultimately they're just going to be viewed as a small portion who don't matter. We want to give them better life side with opposition. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Solve the case for development and the whole environment economic plan. Thank you.
Being a minority in a democracy is always difficult, regardless of whether it's a racial minority, religious minority, or simply a political minority. But the point of most minorities is that they accept that democracy can work, that you can participate in that democracy, that a democracy respects your ability to do so, and you can find some political emancipation along the way, because that is the way democracies set up to work. Their alternative is to say, to throw the toys out of the pram because you are a minority, because only ethno-nationalism can work, and because Iraqis have room to hate Kurds forever. But it is strange for them to say that Iraqis hate Kurds, but that they will not hate Kurds enough to mess with Kurdistan when the Kurds do leave. I think the reverse is true. The Iraqis don't hate Kurds that much, especially in the context we give. But if you choose to reject the nation of Iraq, then you are likely to see all those passions reignited. What did we tell you in our speeches? First thing we told you is that Iraq can offer the Kurds a good deal. We told you about the new unity that was being forged in the flames of war. That because of the new state, the nascent state of Iraq post-Saddam needed a new narrative, the common enemy of ISIS was one that Kurds and Sunnis and Shias, for the first time, fought side by side, fought on the same levels of command. There was a new contribution of the Kurds to this Iraqi republic that they hadn't done before. It was easier to buy Kurds as an important part of Iraq after this than before. They had no real response to this. But we told you also in status quo there are constitutional and parliamentary protections carved out for the Kurds. We told you that Kurds are a significant minority within Iraq. They present a swing vote in parliament that moderates the influence of bickering Sunni and Shiite parties, that both these parties have an incentive to appeal to the middle in order to get more support in parliament to form a government, and so on and so forth. We told you finally that there was a quid pro quo between the Kurds and the Iraqi central government in terms of accessing the oil reserves of Kirkuk for sea access, for the other things that the national government could offer the Kurds. The response to this was to say, oh, but you're a minority, so at the end of the day, you will still not be able to make the decisions in a way that you want all the time. This is trivially true, right? Like, of course, you're a minority, you don't get your way all the time. But the point here is that you are a minority with significant power. You were present at the bargaining table, as opposed to rejecting the bargaining table. We pointed out to you that if you left, you lost that position at the bargaining table, and you were now seen as an enemy. We also pointed out a significant potential harm that you never responded to. Iran's presence, or rather, Kurds' presence in Iraq was to an extent crucial to keep the entire Iraqi national project together. But the worst case scenario these guys might have engaged with is the breakdown of Iraq altogether. But also, the survival of Kurdistan and its desirable goal was ultimately contingent on whether Kurdistan could exist, practically speaking. For a state to exist, it needs one, the ability to control its borders, and two, economic viability. We told you wouldn't have the first, because Turkey and Syria, with essential desires to dominate you, would obviously do things against the new state of Kurdistan. We told you that economic viability would be non-existent, because if Iraqis hated Kurds as much as these guys claimed, they could shut off sea access to Kirkuk, which means that your oil revenues would dwindle to zero, because you wouldn't actually be able to sell the oil yet either to pass through Iraq or Turkey. The only response to this was to say that the international community will rally behind and seal those borders. Late material and whip to tell us that, it's because they are willing to fund these guys against ISIS. We pointed out to you that was the status quo. And a change in the status quo was one that came with significant costs to both the US and the European Union, because for the United States, we would now have to support a Iranian ally, and for the European Union, as well as the United States, we would now have to go against the wishes of an important NATO ally, which was probably more crucial to fight against ISIS, but also just general geostrategic regions in interests in the Middle East. Finally, though, we told you that independence for all Kurds, because the Kurds who could not move, the Kurds who were poorer, could not leave their initial locations to go to this new homeland, and they now be more persecuted in each of their nations than ever before. Things worse for the Kurds. The Kurds needed to stay in Iraq and fight for their place in the new Mesopotamia.
You want to